Hello, and welcome to the Mobile User Acquisition Show, a podcast to help you unlock tremendous growth for your app. My name is Shamanth. I'm the CEO of the boutique growth marketing firm Rocket Ship HQ and host of the podcast Mobile User Acquisition Show. In each episode, we feature experts in the field of mobile growth and discuss strategies, tips, and pointers from the leading edge of mobile growth marketing. By the end of each episode, you will have gained actionable and tactical insights that will help you make more informed decisions in your own work around growth. The Mobile User Acquisition Show is produced by Meryl Vincent, Content Marketing Manager at Rocket Ship HQ.
Our guest for today's episode is Grace Ouma-Cabezas. Grace runs her own growth consulting firm, Go & Co., and she previously headed growth at Poppy Seed Health, an app that supports individuals during pregnancy and postpartum. In today's episode, Grace talks about her experience at Poppy Seed Health and shares how using raw, vulnerable creatives that spoke directly to the pains, hopes, and fears of their users who are pregnant women resulted in dramatic performance gains. She talks about the insights that led to this creative strategy, the actual production process for these ads, and how her team decided to keep the user experience as real and genuine as possible, even when these resulted in ads that were not particularly sexy or happy, and even when these resulted in occasional disapprovals by platforms. In a world of clickbaity, sales-focused creative strategy, Grace brings a unique perspective on the importance of authenticity, vulnerability, and genuineness. And I highly recommend this interview for anyone looking to broaden their creative perspectives.
I'm very excited to welcome Grace Ouma-Cabezas to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. Grace, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thrilled to have you, Grace, because we're going to talk about something very interesting in terms of the way you approach creatives and creative strategy. It's certainly a very unique take. So I'm excited to dive into that with you today. Of course, as we dive in, I think it's perhaps it would be perhaps good to start by giving our listeners a lay of the land and tell them about your product and the product you're working on. So they have some context as we talk about some of the strategy down the line in this interview.
Absolutely. So I head up growth at an app-based telehealth solution called Poppy Seed Health. And Poppy Seed Health connects 24/7 doulas, midwives, and nurses with pregnant and postpartum people via text. So it's a proprietary, unique text-based app product for this very unique and windy life stage that folks have. And primarily, we call them advocates, but our doulas and midwives and nurses are there to provide well-being and emotional support. And it's truly 24/7, 7 days a week.
Yeah, right. And, generally it's pregnancy can be thought of, a lot of ads portray pregnancy as a linear path. And in our last conversation, you shared that unlike a lot of traditional messaging out there, you guys decided to focus on a very different track. So can you tell us what led to the insight to portray pregnancy not as a linear path, and what was the path you guys chose instead?
Yes, absolutely. So we were coming off of, the product itself had about a year of beta testing to kind of wind down what the actual offering should be. But additionally, we're looking at our competitive set from a creative and messaging standpoint and seeing that, especially in the app space, most of the products that folks are interacting with that are in market in pregnancy and that life stage are trackers. And trackers by nature are linear, right? Week 1, week 2, week 3 of your pregnancy up until birth. And those products inherently assume what we would call sort of like a positive path, that you are happy about that pregnancy and that it, goes to a healthful conclusion, which is a healthy baby on the other side and a healthy birthing person on the other side. But we knew through our research and through our lived experiences at Poppy Seed Health that that was not always the case. And even if the end result is a healthy baby, healthy birthing person, the road is windy, and that's why Poppy Seed Health exists. So that initial insight was really the foundational product offering for us.
Sure. So that's very interesting, because what you're also saying is, for a tracker, maybe that messaging is right. But for emotional support, it's not, right? If you want emotional support during what can only be a tumultuous phase, that's not anything but linear.
Yeah. And we had to contend with the reality that we're sitting in the same space. We're different products, but we're sitting in the same competitive space. We're a pregnancy app, right? So you have to be able to grapple with that, even if your offering is not the same.
Certainly. And obviously, a lot of the marketing you guys did and everything we're going to talk about happened after ATT, when just a lot of the tracking and measurement was broken. How did the absence of the IDF inform creative strategy?
Absolutely. I think it was a little bit of a blessing and a curse, especially when I talked to other mobile marketers about this, because we knew what we were dealing with upfront. Actually, the rollout was our launch date, essentially. We launched April 27th, 2021. So it was like that same week. If memory burned into our memories, if memory serves us right, it was that same week. So actually, it was kind of freeing in a way, because we knew that, like, we had already been seeing signs, across, the market, that sort of DTC roadmap of like scalable, almost infinitely scalable, highly targeted Facebook ads was sort of unraveling already. We're already seeing signs of that across the DTC space. So that was a known entity. Then going into losing a lot of that visibility, we knew that we weren't going to be able to refine as much on hints and other things within the algorithm that could get really, really laser into the focus of what life stage that person was in. Of course, it was never perfect. I mean, just because of the work I do, I see a number of ads that don't necessarily relate even before IDFA went away, that didn't necessarily relate to my life stage based on my browsing behavior, app behavior, et cetera, et cetera. So it was never 100% perfect, but we knew that we're going to lose a lot of those inferences. So initially, in order to kind of convey who we were serving, we really thought creative first, and that the creative would help illustrate the personas and the use cases for us, and could do some of the work that we were losing in the targeting, if that makes sense. So how can we portray that nonlinear pregnancy, postpartum, bumpy journey in a way that could be compelling and really go creative forward, messaging forward, and then think about how the channel supported each of those elements. So I think it's a way that I like to work, but it made it even more imperative that we work that way versus channel first. How can we, work the algorithm to our favor first and foremost?
I think that absolutely makes sense. You can't like laser target specific micro audiences, if you will, right? That just became impossible, right? Yeah. And, speaking to the specifics of your creative strategy, right? What were some of the standout moments in somebody's pregnancy journey that you guys featured in Ad Creators? How did you decide on these specific moments? Why did you think they worked?
Yes. So it was a combination of sort of things that we had heard from initial beta members for our product. So it was like, what were those actual questions that we were getting? Also combined with, again, leaning into this idea that this is not a linear path, that the everyday actually presents challenges that many birthing people don't think of as rising to the occasion of needing help, but are pretty universal. So for example, we showed a person breast pumping for milk and then wondering, am I producing enough milk? And as they're doing that, they're sort of typing the question into Poppy Seed Health. We had a diaper blowout.
Oh, wow.
No, it wasn't real. It was fictionalized, but in a very realistic way. because we know that that was a very visceral and real experience that people have. And then it's like, how many of these are normal in a day? So we tried to really take those moments and illustrate them in the most compelling way possible, and then connect them directly to how they related back to the product. So so that's kind of how we did it. And then also knowing what things were unspoken, because we were a texting app in a space that was safe for birthing people to ask these questions that they may be ashamed to ask, or again, may not think. They sort of wonder out loud, is it normal, but not sure who the right person to go to. So that also informed. We had an image of someone combing their hair and larger clumps of hair than they were interested in. Then nobody wants clumps of hair to come out of their head, but larger clumps of hair that they were used to. And then so highlighting postpartum hair loss, which is something that's quite common, but isn't often talked about. So it was also a little bit of like inferences into like things that we knew in our lived experience happen, things that people were asking us, and that aren't, that's not something that is highlighted in a tracker pregnancy app. That's not something that's highlighted in a pregnancy test ad. Just thinking of all these other creatives that speak to that life stage. That's not what's shown. What's shown is that happen with the baby bump, smiling, or a baby on their hip or something like that. So
what I also find fascinating, Grace, in what you said is that the primary focus is on the actual lived experience of these people.
Yeah.
And not as much on the app. And, the app itself is a text window. Mm-hmm. And if all you did was show the text window, it would be nowhere as compelling to the actual experience of these folks.
Yeah, because a large part of it is also the need exists, but because in the market there wasn't a solution, I think people just sort of, they didn't know that they were looking for poppy seed health, to put it that way. So showing the inside of the app, wouldn't be as compelling as showing a real life situation that you could be in, and then connecting it to that moment, to the product.
Sure. And did a lot of these ads also depict the solution, which is talking to somebody and feeling somewhat reassured? Was that a part of the ads too?
Yeah, we wanted to integrate the phone and the texting without like showing it in screen. Sure. So in every image there was, the subject was on their phone texting. We had a couple iterations where we showed the text bubble over that context image. That was also really compelling, so we can kind of pull it together.
Right, very impressive. To switch gears a little bit, I don't know about you, but in my experience on Facebook, I've often seen creative that just doesn't look like it's special, and that creative often wins in the auctions. Sometimes it can be stupid simple, like a JPEG or a very short video, but just like the algorithm favors it so much that it sets off an effect where this particular ad eats up all of the spend.
Yes.
In fact, I was talking to somebody and they were like, we have this really stupid ad that's winning. Everybody on our team hates it.
Definitely been there.
Right? Because they're like, we have very strategically thought out ad. We looked at our users, and what wins is some stupid JPEG, which looks ugly, basically, right?
Yeah.
So, generally the biggest challenge is in ensuring that any new creative gets love from the algorithm. It builds up enough history over time, right, so that it actually gets performed, right? So, we talked about some of the actual concepts, which certainly were very emotionally intense, and I can see why they would absolutely speak to users.
Yeah.
How did you account for the fact that even though these ads spoke to users, they may not get love from algorithms, at least early on? And how did you address this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I know I was nodding because I can think of so many different brands I've been at where it's like, you're having to explain to the CEO, I know we all hate this ad, but it just does so well. I think it's really interesting that you bring that up, because in the context of poppy seed health, actually our more evocative, almost brandy asset is what did the best, which actually surprised me. So I was going into, when we were looking at the overall distribution strategy and looking at how we're going to use our initial photo shoot and maximize the assets, I actually requested a lot of simpler, pare down, focused on one story, a little bit more neater kind of packaging that was more kind of highlighted the product I thought best. And then we also created a 30-second compilation video that was like, could be a TV commercial, you know what I mean, in terms of how it flowed. That one did the best. It was like the flagship brand asset from a creative standpoint, and it also performed the best. That being said, I had never, I don't want to say never experienced this because I feel like I'm doing this forever, but I can't remember a time when kind of that brandy asset did the best. I almost wonder, like, in this new environment, if there was something, you know what I mean, like that actually is what shined through. But that being said, we still had the situation where we had this one winner that was gobbling up, you know what I mean, all of the impressions and all of the reach. And we did want to test into different concepts based on what we learned, you know, like it was a kind of a compilation that told a lot of different stories. But then we wanted to try something that was more text-based. We wanted to try, you know, testimonials. We wanted to try other things that kind of went beyond the great brand feeling of this thing exists, to get people a little bit further down the funnel. And just from a tactical perspective in our setup, we created a distinct campaigns for new creative to try and overcome some of those algorithm challenges. So they weren't all just in one campaign or in campaigns that were in competition with each other. So, and also just making sure that they were distinct enough too. So it wasn't like we're having, you know, 15-second cuts of the 30-second when we know the 30-second does well, right? Like, let's really come through a brand new concept and see what traction we can get, because it was, that video was just dominating the airwaves for a while now. And that's how we just sort of did it tactically, and, you know, tried to at least get 4 to 6 weeks of concrete learnings, but having them as their distinct campaigns with a distinct budget and making sure they're different enough did help us discover some additional winners. And actually some of the original more pared down content that initially was being beat by that 30-second video, we gave that a similar treatment of treating it like a, you know, constructing it as a distinct campaign, and found some new winners even in some of those previous ones. So that's kind of tactically how we navigated that. But
so you're building those in a conceptually different way so that it's going to speak to completely different audiences.
Yes.
And you're isolating it away from the historical winner. Right? And if I may ask a follow-up, right? So if you're isolating new ads from the historical winner, until the new ads get enough love from the algorithm, those ads performance is going to suck, at least for a little bit of time, or at least that's been my experience. So how did you treat that as basically test budget that we are prepared to completely lose? How did you think about allocating budget to proven ones versus what you're testing?
Exactly. We treated it like a test budget and considered it like the percentage of the whole for that channel. And I think, you sometimes have to just stay the course, because you can see something kind of, you know, once some of that history is built up. But absolutely, we saw it as a test budget and thought, you know, probably for our spend level, we thought of it as like no more than a quarter for 4 weeks to go against kind of this new concept. And then at the 4-week mark, we could evaluate. And if it really was, tanking bad, then we could make a decision, you know, in the moment. But I think overall there was more gain in using that and kind of having that creative testing mentality than there was loss in the net.
Sure. And I also imagine you could turn off individual ads if they're tanking, right? If you're 10, maybe 3 are really bad, but hopefully some of the rest you could keep them going.
Yeah, exactly.
No, thank you for getting a little bit in the weeds with me, because these are so many things I'm curious about, because of frustrations we face just as well. So this is generally helpful to know, right? And again, not to get into too many follow-ups, you did express that the brand asset was doing very well historically, continue to do well. What was that ad about?
Sure. So it kind of pulled together we had a couple of different scenarios that we shot and portrayed, and this pulled them all together. So there was the breast pump, that aforementioned breast and diaper blowout. There was also like what we tried to simulate, like late night in the bathroom, wondering like, am I okay? For the pregnant person, we showed a video of the hair loss I had aforementioned. So it kind of pulled together all of those stories with some thematic music and then like an overlay at the end, basically like we're here for it all, for pregnancy, postpartum, and all the messy in between. So because it kind of went through all the story, my initial thinking was, I think the micro stories are going to do better, right? Because someone's going to see themselves in one of these scenarios, not all of these scenarios, because they can't happen all at once. Some were clearly pregnancy, some were very clearly postpartum, some were a little bit in. But I think what the takeaway for us was like just taking folks through that journey. And again, it wasn't in order. It was different people being depicted. It was different stages. It wasn't like one person going through it in the right order. But I think there's something about foreshadowing that in this life stage is really powerful, because if it's your first pregnancy and you just don't know what you don't know, right? And if you can imagine, oh, I may need help with that, or like that looks like something that I may need assistance with. And even if one of those scenarios resonates with you, I think it just overall built trust that we understood what the journey looked like. But yeah, that was actually a surprise to me. I mean, it was beautiful, I thought, but I thought this is one of those beautiful ads that's not going to, that's not going to get much reach, or that's a little bit too broad. It's not speaking specifically enough, but it did phenomenal.
Right. And certainly it got love from the algorithms, as did some of the new ads you guys tested. Did a lot of these ads get love from the manual reviewers at the platforms as well?
Less so. The reviewers were not as big fans of a lot of the imagery that we're depicting. Luckily, I was able to contest almost all of those and get ads reinstated, but we definitely got, our hands slapped in the algorithm, and mistakenly were marked as adult content in that initial robotic review. But usually the humans, we're hoping a human, looked at it and then appealed it. But yeah, I mean, that's the challenge of being in this space. And what I really appreciated is, because I've definitely been places where, and I mean, and I think it added further context into why other advertisers in this space do what they do. Showing a baby bump and a smiling person is a very safe ad that is likely not going to be rejected, and who wants to go through the hassle of that? But I think from a brand standpoint, it was just important for us to be real. And sometimes that gets caught in those filters, but we're doing it with taste and with honesty, and it was resonating so much with people that we knew it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, this is certainly a frustration I've heard from other folks who work with women's health.
Yes.
Or sexual wellness, right?
Yes.
They get tripped up by algorithms all the time, which is frustrating because these are very important facets of people's health.
Yes.
Right. And but hopefully, but sounds like you were able to get through after some hiccups.
Yeah, after some hiccups, we were able to overcome those rejections. Yeah. It's a badge of honor to a certain point, like
you can imagine, right? You're really pushing the envelope on that, right?
Yeah.
And I know you described some of the ads. So these are all showing real people. Presumably that requires prep, rehearsals, scripting, a lot of groundwork.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the actual production process for these ads, especially early on, because I will imagine once some of these are somewhat proven out, you can work with agencies, you can have a somewhat more established setup. But early on, what was the production setup earlier on?
Sure. Yeah. So this was really unique and I think exciting, at least in my experience and being an early stage, is that, well, for one, I think our founder just had a vision of how she wanted, a general sense of how she wanted things to look, which is always helpful. But we had an in-house team. We have a really incredible creative director, and we did all of this in-house. We do all of our concepting in-house, our ideating in-house, and we truly did it as a team. So it was there's a lot of really great lessons learned actually from this first production. We, like mentioned, we used real people. I mean, everyone's real. I don't like to call models not real people, but they were not models. They were not
Sure.
professional models. They're people that we knew in our actual lives. So if we knew someone who just had a baby, who had a baby bump, those are the folks that we invited. So they were able to depict things that were really happening in their life. So that helped with the scripting aspect. It was much more storyboarding, and it was non-speaking. Highly recommend that if you're looking to go this route. That takes off a lot of pressure off the plate, and more so storyboarding what we wanted to depict, how it looked. And because these people were tapping into their real life experience, it wasn't really hard. And again, like I said, these are not professionals. It really was not hard for somebody who has a baby to imagine that diaper blowout, you know. And the person that was pumping was truly pumping. She had a child that she was breastfeeding. So that helped a lot. We were drawing context from these subjects' real lives. But yeah, we rented a house. We got a lot of freelancers to help on the production side. Like it was quite the operation. And it was a 2-day long shoot, out of which came that very aforementioned 30-second video, several stills. I think it was probably 10 stills overall, and a couple of different video snapshots. So it was a big front load shoot for a new brand, right? What we learned is that the core was really the story. So when we came, whipped back around almost a year later to do another shoot, it was much more pared down. It really focused, because we realized, especially from the video, right, that what people were drawn to is like this story that resonates with them, and that we needed to, like, the actual people, not professional models, worked well. And we didn't need as much context in terms of set that we had before, that we can really focus it on storytelling. So we did another shoot recently where it was just different individuals in different stages of pregnancy and postpartum telling their stories. We did, we shot, one of our designers shot on her iPhone. 30 seconds, tell me about yourself, tell me about where you're on your journey. We're able to compile that into a beautiful video and get these really, really great stills that still had such a powerful brand impact that was maybe 10% of the cost of the initial shoot. So I know a lot of startups do it the opposite way. And I think that's driven by, I think the sensibility of the leadership team and, how we wanted to encapsulate the brand. But it was a really big learning in what you can get when you pare down. And I'm glad we went as far as we could in the beginning, because we were really able to capture really great learnings. But it then kind of taught us that we can pare it down. This is what the people care about. And we didn't have to question production value or kind of those things that get questioned when things aren't performing well. Well, it's because we did it in this kind of if we spent more money on it, then it would have been this. It's like we got to kind of prove that on the outset,
Yeah, certainly. That's very impressive. And just to dig in, when you say these were not like professional models, were they friends and family? How did you find these folks?
Friends and family.
Oh, wow. Okay. And has that changed? Just the composition of the actors changed since then?
It's remained fairly similar. It's amazing. I think the first shoot actually helped us recruit our friends and family. Ironically enough, people saw the level of quality, sometimes your friends and family are not just jumping to be model in a shoot, especially when it's about their life and their life experience. So I think in a way, the first shoot kind of built our legitimacy in terms of the care and the quality that helped recruit the people closest to us to do it. But it's not an easy ask, actually. So I don't dismiss the friends and family route. It's, it's not always easy, and it's not always an option depending on your products. But I think if you can, it can be really powerful.
Yeah. And, seen in a certain light, it's probably harder to recruit friends and family because you could conceivably compensate somebody enough to act in a certain manner, but with friends and family to be on camera in their most vulnerable moments, that's not easy. So if you recollect, what was the pitch to them? Was there, I'm curious if you recollect what made them say yes, and was there any hesitation? What was their communication like at the time?
Sure. Yeah. So I think like for us at Poppy Seed Health, we're able to kind of lean into our overall mission that like we're building this product that is helping pregnant and postpartum people. You know, this is what we want to provide. So a lot of people were connected, despite being connected to us. They were also connected to the mission of our brand. So that's super helpful, right? Like people who actually believe in what you're doing. That I think is probably 90% of it. And then, you know, on the compensation piece, we want to be fair. We want to compensate people for their time, but also acknowledge the fact that these aren't professional models. So you're not paying the same rate as you would for a professional model, but we always want to ensure there's compensation
Sure.
for their time, that their travel is covered. So those are things that we bring up front. And we also like to talk a little bit about impact. I mean, I think for the second shoot, it was easier. We had a year's worth of being live in the market that we could say, these are the people we've touched, these are the people we've helped, and you can be a part of spreading awareness of who we are. So, I mean, it's a little, you know, wishy, it's a little squishy and like emotional, but that was kind of like the best hook, other than the tactics of, we're going to pay you something. We're going to pay you. We're going to cover your, you know, travel and transportation. Yeah. And we gave people a chance to like ask questions. I think it's a big thing. I mean, like you said, these are not professionals. So like making it really clear what we want from them, what the time commitment is. Those details are incredibly important when recruiting your friends and family for a photo shoot.
Yeah. And I would imagine the money is not the most important part in this.
Yeah.
And it's certainly important. They obviously have to get paid. They have to get paid a fair amount, but it's certainly not the most important part.
Yeah, they're not looking to get rich off of this one day shoot.
No. Yeah. You know, we've worked with a number of kids apps. So certainly those moments are not as vulnerable as what you're describing.
Yeah.
But for a parent to have their kid on camera, and that is a big ask, and I think we found out. But I think the folks that were the most enthusiastic were also the ones that were excited and proud about what the kid was doing and about using the product itself. Because again, these are products that help kids do well. Right?
Yes,
and
exactly.
Certainly, I think just speaking to some of that, I think can be very helpful. And because it cannot be, I think, just purely transactional.
Yeah.
Also, right, I understand, Grace, from the last time we spoke, you guys have worked with creators.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what that means, what that sort of direction of producing creatives looks like.
Yeah. Sure. So I think from the very beginning, when we were launching, again, in this kind of post IDFA world, and wanting to start off with a little bit more of a diversified channel mix, even for our spend and size, than I think we would have previously. So one of those opportunity channels right off the bat was TikTok. And as we were thinking of how to engage with the channel, it just was clear to us that we had to start through creators. Like it was going to take time to build our own organic presence. We had to figure out what we even wanted our point of view to be. We knew you had to create content that worked for that platform. So working with creators was basically a no-brainer to kind of get ourselves on there. And we're like identifying who best to work with. I mean, also on a tactical note, I should mention, most TikTok creators are charging a fraction of what similar creators on Instagram would charge for now. I don't know how long that's going to last, but there's just a greater instance of virality on TikTok, and there's just more people and individuals that have large followings, and it's based on what they're putting out into the world, not purely aesthetic. So for a number of reasons that was appealing to us. When we're looking at creators and sort of how that workflow was, we're thinking about people that fit into this nonlinear journey. So folks that had children, but maybe had also experienced a pregnancy loss, people that had gone through fertility treatment, people, you know, that were just in these different life stages that were very contextual to us. And then we also thought it was a way for us to also test tone too. So there's folks that are funny, you know, there's people that are a little bit more serious and a little bit, they get maybe deeper into their personal lives. And, you know, there's people who do exclusively family content, and there's people who maybe do a little bit more lifestyle content, but they're also parents. So it also gave us an opportunity to kind of test different tones in a way that we just didn't have the resources to, right? Like described what we did from a photo shoot perspective, but aside from that, you know, we needed other footage. So it was, you know, we put together a pretty simple briefing process. We then sort of evolved it if there was something particular in the month we wanted to focus on, et cetera. But it's become this really wonderful bank of assets that we can use across Reels, you know, on TikTok itself, and then helped just further contextualize who we were. And it's been pretty powerful.
Sure. If you were to contrast the way you approach the creators with how you described you approach the friends and family for the photo shoot, how would that approach be different for the creators? What does the brief look like? What does the outreach look like?
Yeah, for sure. We tried to be as open-ended with the brief as possible because we really wanted to honor the style of that creator, because we a lot of the work was on the front end in our perspective in terms of vetting and looking at all the sea of applicable people. And we sort of worked out a loose formula of number of followers based on what we knew sort of the going rate was, the type of engagement on your most recent videos, your tone, et cetera, how that fit through our brand filter, which we had to find pretty early on. So that then made it so we were identifying people that we trusted enough and that we thought their style was compelling enough and that their audience engagement was compelling enough that we can give a somewhat open-ended brief in terms of, we absolutely want you to create this in your style. You know what I mean? We've chosen you because we think that you are brand aligned and then you're interesting and that we like your style. And then we just had a few key points around call to action. I think that's something that can kind of fall away, especially with a lot of the TikTok creators, who many of which we worked with. We were one of their first brand partners. And actually, you know, thinking about the differences of the pitch, I mean, many of them were compelled by being a part of growing something that they felt was important. So that was, I think, one through line between the friends and family recruitment and the content creator recruitment, especially being a new brand, is that they resonated with, you know, the product we're building and who we're serving, and they saw themselves in it. So I think that was the common thread. But for the creators, it was a bit more open-ended. Here are the things you must say on the call to action side, because that's easiest to get missed. But you normally gave parameters around timing, et cetera. But other than that, we kept it pretty open. And then that has been, you know, that's worked out fairly well for us. I think the big learning was just being super clear on the call to actions, because that would be the thing that sometimes you review and be like, this was hilarious, but they didn't really tell people how to get back to us.
If I had to get into a tactical detail, are you evaluating like installs and down funnel events from the creators as well? And if yes, how are you thinking about it?
Sure, yeah. So we were primarily tracking that through, we're tracking conversions through promo codes.
Sure.
So that was sort of the simplest way. We also gave people a tracking link. One of the requirements was sort of to have a link in bio going back to us for at least 48 hours. They would often keep it up longer. And then we were able to track direct downloads from there. What we saw most commonly was like code usage, and then also just sort of overall incremental installs around that 24-hour period of the video is usually what we notice the most, because TikTok is not necessarily a platform when people want to leave and then go take an action, but they will absolutely use that code and then go, you know, to the app store later. So that's what we saw the most.
Right, and that all makes sense, especially with the broken tracking around, right? So I think we just need to embrace some of the things like that. Also, right, you know, you talked quite a bit about some of the different angles you guys have taken. How did you think about the volume of creatives or the number of creatives you produced? And maybe the answer is different for the photo shoots and the creators. How do you think about that?
Sure, I think for our own assets that we created, we did have to kind of have some discipline around the number, right? And that was mostly mitigated by our spend. We didn't want to, we had a certain budget and we didn't want to dilute so much that there were things that were barely getting any reach and then we're sort of like overproducing. So it was actually a little bit of a learning. Like we learned together on the creative side and the growth side around what that looked like. And also how to spend our time and energy. I kind of look at marketing resources very holistically, including, what you spend to create an asset, not just how much is spent on the media. So as reflected in the second shoot, we're sort of able to calibrate, what we should spend, how much we should produce, et cetera. But a lot of that was mitigated by the budget. On the creator side, it was much more open because each creator has their own audience, they have their own style. I guess we're all mitigated by everything's mitigated by budget, but there was less of a thought of, oh, we don't want to have 4 or 5 of these things live in action at the same time.
Sure.
Like, absolutely, we do want that actually, because this creator A has a completely different audience than creator B, and they're not really even in competition with each other in the same way that too many assets running on Facebook would. So.
Sure. Right. And I know you said this was mainly governed by the budget on at least the photo shoot side and certainly on the creator side, but in somewhat different ways. Right. Yeah. But were you thinking about, if you were to take just Facebook, were you thinking, we need to have X number of assets in testing at any given point of time? Was that like a rule or a rule of thumb of some sort that you were looking at?
Yeah, I think we basically had a rule of thumb similar to that. So I would say just like based on our spend, like we had maybe 4 or 5 ads in play and, 1 or 2 of those in a given time would be a test.
Right.
So that's pretty much remained constant. And then we would sort of swap in and swap out of position based on performance. So we tried to maintain that. And for the most part, we've maintained that.
Sure. And for the production cadence, right, for the photo shoots, are you like looking at saying, we need to make X number of new ads every month or every quarter? Is there a quantified sort of number of things that you're looking at?
I think of them in 4 to 6 week sprints primarily. And one of the learnings again is like with this second shoot, where the costs were reduced so much, we took a lot more stills. So we'd have more things to be able to use, test, and with graphic design, because that's also another aspect of it, right? Like you can kind of create different versions that are text-based, how you overlay text, how you, and having some more raw assets gives us more options to kind of mix and match as time goes on. But I normally thought of it as 4 to 6 week sprints and thinking about shoots that are a year's worth of assets. I think that's the most sustainable way to think about it. Even 2 years worth of assets, if you can get away with it, but thinking about shoots that have more life, you know what I mean?
Right.
And how was that, if you're going to capture video, like I explained in a more pared down way, actually has more value, because there's more of it that you can capture and use over time versus getting a professional videographer and costs mitigating how many of these things you can actually produce.
Sure. Grace, all of that makes so much sense. This has been incredible. I think we've gone on for a fair amount of time. Thank you for being so vulnerable and open about everything you guys have done. It's certainly a very unique perspective and interview for me. This is perhaps a good place for us to start to wrap. But before we do that, could you tell folks how they can find out more about you and everything you do?
Sure. So actually, this is an exciting moment. I've officially launched my growth consulting. So I can spread all these amazing growth learnings and my impact across several different consumer companies. So you can find more about that at www.goandco, so goandco.co. Hopefully that makes sense. And folks can always search for me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to accept new connections. And that's the best way to kind of keep tabs of what I'm up to.
Excellent. And we will link to your LinkedIn and of course to your website and the show notes. But for now, we will let you carry on with the rest of your day, Grace.
Thank you so much.
For more tips, pointers, and strategies from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition, subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, or check out our blog, rocketship.hq.com/blog.